Hi, I'm John Paul McFarland with HR Insight. Welcome back. This is episode 2 of a two-part series on what every supervisor needs to know about labor unions and the NLRA. As I mentioned briefly in episode 1, labor relations can be complicated. There are laws, rights, restrictions, organizing campaigns, elections, grievances, and even strikes. And if you're a supervisor, you sit right in the middle of it. So let's begin by reviewing what restrictions supervisors may face under the NLRA. These restrictions are often summarized in the acronym T.I.P.S, T-I.P.S, threaten, interrogate, promise, and spy. These are actions that management must not engage in when employees are considering union representation. You cannot threaten loss of pay or job privileges, promise raises to discourage union support, question employees about how they'll vote, ask who attended union meetings, discriminate against employees for organizing, or attempting to dominate or control a union. And here's a modern twist. A supervisor getting access to an employee's private social media activity by coercion or deception or during union organizing campaigns can become a legal issue. A helpful companion to the concept of T.I.P.S is F.O.E, F-O-E, which stands for Facts, Opinions, and Experiences. Employers can share factual information about unionization, express opinions without threats, and share personal experiences. For example, you could say, "It's my opinion that direct communication works better for us than third-party representation." That's lawful, as long as it's not paired with threats or promises. In union workplaces, disputes are resolved through formal grievance procedures outlined in the collective bargaining agreement. A grievance is a claim that the contract has been violated, whether that involves discipline, pay, scheduling, seniority, or working conditions. Supervisors are often the first step in this process. How you document discipline, apply policies consistently, and communicate decisions directly affects whether grievances succeed or fail. Inconsistent enforcement, poor documentation, or casual deviations from policy can quickly become contract disputes. Most union agreements include multiple grievance steps, beginning with the supervisor and potentially escalating all the way to arbitration. If a grievance proceeds to arbitration, a neutral third party called an arbitrator hears evidence and issues a binding decision. That decision is enforceable and very difficult to overturn. Here's another important concept supervisors must understand: past practice. In unionized workplaces, if a policy or behavior has been applied consistently over time, even if it's not written in a contract, it can become binding. That means supervisors cannot simply change long-standing practices without bargaining. Consistency matters, documentation matters, and process matters. And this leads to one of the most practical realities of supervising in a union environment. Everything must be documented. Discipline must be supported by clear facts. Coaching conversations should be summarized. Policy violations should be documented at the time they occur, not reconstructed weeks later. In arbitration, decisions are not based on memory, they are based on evidence. Arbitrators look for progressive discipline, consistent enforcement, and written records that show employees were treated fairly and equally. If similar misconduct produced different outcomes, you will be asked to explain why. And the explanation must be grounded in documented facts, not assumptions. Good documentation is not about building a case against the employee, it's about demonstrating fairness, consistency, and due process. Here's another critical rule in union workplaces: Weingarten Rights, or otherwise known as union representation. If an employee reasonably believes a meeting could lead to discipline, they have a right to request union representation. This right, however, is not automatic. The employee must request it. But once requested, the supervisor must either delay the meeting until the union representative arrives or end the meeting entirely. You may not ignore or discourage the request, and you may not continue questioning after a request is made. Failing to honor Weingarten Rights can result in an unfair labor practice charge, even if the underlying discipline was justified. Let's talk about strikes. Strikes are rare but powerful. Economic strikes focus on wages or working conditions. These are pretty straightforward, and during such strikes, workers may be replaced under certain circumstances. Strikes over unfair labor practices are different. Those workers cannot be permanently replaced. Examples of unfair labor practices include disciplining an employee for supporting a union, threatening employees over union activity, and spying on union organizing activities. There are also wildcat strikes. These are strikes organized without union's approval. Most collective bargaining agreements contain a no-strike clause, meaning the union agrees that an employee will not strike during the contract term. So wildcat strikes in these cases usually lose NLRA protection. However, in non-union settings, wildcat strikes can actually be protected as protected concerted activity. Again, context matters significantly. For supervisors, the takeaway is simple. If a strike happens, you are in a highly regulated legal environment. Every action must be coordinated with HR and legal counsel. There's a labor relations proverb that says, companies usually get the labor unions they deserve. That means the likelihood and character of union representation are significantly influenced by the employer's culture, communication policies, and supervisor behavior. Unions rarely appear out of nowhere. Employees typically organize because they feel disrespected, ignored, inconsistently treated, unheard on pay, safety, or workload, or afraid to raise concerns individually. Supervisors are on the front line of this experience. You cannot eliminate every disagreement, but you can control fair evaluations, consistent rule enforcement, open communication, and taking feedback seriously. If employees believe management is fair, accessible, and responsive, union campaigns are much harder to sustain. In many cases, the best union avoidance strategy is excellent management. Let's return to that coal town in 1914. Conflict erupted because workers felt unheard. The NLRA emerged decades later as a national framework to manage that tension peacefully through elections, bargaining, and legal protections. Today the tools are different, but the core dynamic is unchanged. Employees want safety, fairness, stability, and respect. The NLRA guarantees them the right to pursue those things collectively. As a supervisor, your role is not to suppress rights, it's to understand them. So always operate within the law, communicate honestly, avoid threats and promises, and respond to concerns professionally. And above all, lead in a way that makes formal conflict less likely in the first place. Labor relations is about trust, and trust often rests in the hands of the supervisors. If you understand the law, respect employees' rights, and manage with consistency and integrity, you build a workplace where people feel heard before they feel compelled to organize.
John Paul here. If you like this video, check out the HR Insight YouTube channel where we have more videos just like this. Make sure to click subscribe so you get notifications.